Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and welcome to today's webinar on key drivers of tourism resilience and recovery for Asia Pacific travel. Apologies for the slight delay. We just had a slight technical difficulties, but that's something you can't foresee with stuff like Zoom or any of the software you may use in the virtual space. So we have a fantastic presentation today from our good friend Olivier at TCI Research. But first, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Paul Brangan. I am the Chief of Staff at the Pacific Asia Travel Association, and I will be your host for today. I know many of you are familiar with Zoom, but just a quick refresher for those of you who haven't used it in a while. As you can see from the screen, there is a chat function and Q&A function. Feel free to drop any questions for our presenter using the Q&A function. He'll have a 30-minute presentation and they'll take some questions at the end of it. So feel free to drop any questions using the Q&A as shown on your screen. Please don't put any questions in the chat function, but feel free to say hello. If you have any comments or thoughts about the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. But questions in the Q&A, please. Thank you so much. So without further ado, let's move to the beginning of this webinar and allow me to introduce and welcome to begin today's webinar, PATA CEO, Ms. Liz Ortiguer, to give her opening remarks. Liz?
Thank you, Paul.
Is your camera on?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. And welcome everyone to our webinar on the topic of tourism resilience and recovery for Asia Pacific. I'm speaking to you on the heels of participating in UNWTO's ministerial roundtable, which addressed two key topics: tourism resilience and community-based tourism. During this ministerial roundtable, I was joined by ministry or government leaders from a number of countries, including Maldives, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Nicaragua, to speak on the topic. During this session, and in collaboration with Secretary General of UNWTO Zurab, I'm offering the PATA Destination Resilience Program training available for free to all national, provincial, and city governments to train them on the critical resiliencies to address in their markets. As PATA, part of our mission is to support all destinations in preserving their communities, environments, and cultural heritage, while at the same time gaining the economic benefits of travel. Resilience is the foundation for sustainability, and all destinations need to better preserve their locations. This program was developed with support from GMZ, GIZ, and leveraged the expertise of 20 different industry experts. Contact my team for more information. All destinations need to be adopting better destination management or face the risk of being left behind. Other topics of keen interest for us include community-based tourism, sustainable authentic gastronomy, event-driven tourism, and ecotourism, a few topics that Olivier will share more on today. We'll be hosting our PATA Destination Marketing Forum event in Songkhla, Thailand on August 3rd and 4th. Do register to join. The conference fee is free for all members. We'll be sharing best practices on destination marketing and destination management, and a keynote speech will be delivered by our new ambassador for sustainable gastronomy, Master Chef Asia and Singapore judge and chef, Audra Maurice. Audra has been a great friend for several years, and I've known her to be passionate about Asian local ingredients and heritage cooking. She's also shared a passion for this movement on sustainable gastronomy. So come join us in Thailand to listen to Audra and a number of engaging speakers. It will involve a one-day local experience tour with 3 different options, plus a conference day. And as I mentioned, event access is free for our members. Lastly, with today's event, we're pleased to present research in collaboration with TCI Research on the topics I've mentioned. The report on issues and trends is available today. This report is complimentary for all our members, and it's available for purchase by non-members. Check out our social media and our newsletters for more information. And then lastly, my warm thanks to Olivier and TCI Research for their collaboration on these important trends and topics in travel. Over to you, Olivier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you, Paul, for having me. It's always a pleasure. I would say I have two reasons to be happy today. One is I'm always happy when presenting and sharing data and trends with this fantastic association of PATA. And of course, in terms of content, I think it's another reason to be happy today because, well, if you remember 2 years ago, we were all in this kind of panic room talking about the crisis management, and now we're talking and mentioning a lot about positivity, resilience, and tourism coming back and everything. So it's always, you feel better when you can present elements around positivity and resilience. So I'm going to share my screen in a minute. I just need to make sure that you can see it. Hopefully now in a presenting mode. All right.
Yep, looks good.
Looks good. Okay, so let's start the story. So I was saying that the focus today is not necessarily to give the big numbers about visitation and everything, but trying to understand what is actually driving, what can explain, what can support the destination and travel brands recovery and resilience in a more, let's say, qualitative way. When I say qualitative, I mean trying to understand all the conversation tracks and every aspects around social conversations that are behind the numbers and behind the reputation recovery. And so what we do for that is using a social listening technique. So it's based on the TravelSat kind of a reference indicator, which is fueling many recovery dashboards today, including the one from UNWTO and all these webinars we do for PATA. So the concept is really to focus on the drivers of reputation. And the reason why we focus a lot about the reputation aspect is because we all know in recovery time, in resilience time, your reputation as a destination brand, as a travel brand, as an hotelier chain, your reputation is driving a lot of the recovery, because basically in a post-crisis time, people are kind of planning and choosing the brand and the destination they trust. And now they have a choice, more choice than before. It's still a bit restricted, still a bit limited, but we know in a panel of possibilities, the consumers very naturally are going to choose destination they trust. And the trust is fueled massively by what is shared online, what is discussed, what is how destinations are portrayed in all the social sources at large. So it's not only it's not a consumer survey, it's more about understanding the dynamic and the polarity of conversation as shared by the conversations at large, including the media, including citizens, consumers, or the brands, the companies, and of course the officials and the DMO, and trying to understand the positive and negative balance, but also what is driving those numbers. So let me start with another update about how Asia-Pacific destinations are discussed or portrayed on social conversations overall. We have this indicator we call the net sentiment score, which is basically from -100 to 100. So if everything is positive, nothing is negative, you have 100 score. If everything is negative and nothing positive, -100. And if within all conversations shared socially, you have as many positive as negative posts and articles, you have a score of 0. So what you see, if we look back in the past, in terms of the film of the reputation of Asia Pacific, as obviously we may remember, and we all want to forget that now, but like 2 years ago, the reputation of destination in Asia Pacific, just like all destinations in the world, have been hit very hard with extremely negative scores, and then it went back. What is interesting to see in a mid to short term, back in the past, is we see starting early 2021 that basically Asia Pacific rebounded quite fast in terms of reputation. We had very frequently a score above 30 points net, which is quite good, kind of very close to pre-pandemic scores. And if we focus really on the last, let's say the past 6 to 8 months, we're seeing a good dynamic, not only in absolute values. You see the score kind of exceeding 40 points very frequently, very regularly, and it's very close to the pre-pandemic situation. But also we are seeing an increase of very positive volumes of conversations about Asia Pacific destination. This is based on an average of the top 20 destinations in the region. So not only we're seeing an increase of positivity in social conversations about the countries in context of travel, but also compared to the average competition, we see Asia Pacific kind of more frequently above the global competition than below, whereas after the crisis, Asia Pacific tend to be slightly below the norm. So we are having a positive dynamic overall. Of course, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different drivers that can explain the positive and the negative. Just to summarize very quickly, the key drivers of positivity, as you may expect, is all around conversations talking about borders reopening, destinations reopening, this very high travel sentiment. It's not pent up at all today. It's like very expressing in a very natural way. So we used to have a lot of people sharing past souvenirs when everything was closed, and now it's fueled by people sharing their trip experience a lot. So huge demand. Tourism's back, flights are full, the cruise is resuming also, and it's very positive for the reputation. The festivals who used to be canceled so many times are now back on track. And so the positivity is really there. Of course, there are still a bit of upwinds scenarios that are sometimes developing. It's usually very much not totally related to tourism aspects, but we know it's also influencing the reputation of place to visit. I'm referring, of course, to still some sort of uncertainties about the pandemic. Resurgence in some places, it could be linked to the climate disasters. Of course, some geopolitical tensions here and there. And in terms of tourism, a lot of travel frictions. As we all know, there is at the same time a high peak in demand and people wanting to travel back and get the full experience. And on the other hand, some shortage in the labor, creating a lot of travel frictions and chaos in airports, and sometimes restricted experiences for visitors. So, and obviously more recently, the problem of the inflation and rising costs, which is kind of mitigating the positivity and optimism, and also putting extra pressure on the value for money. So the overall picture remains positive in terms of dynamic. Asia Pacific is gaining progressively competitiveness also compared to the average. And so what we want to know is analyzing what is driving this recovery path, and conversations between destinations who are kind of super positive in terms of recovery compared to the average, and understand the driver of that. So one way to do that is to continue looking at social conversations and to measure, for example, what are the key sentiment drivers, or the topic, the themes which are supporting the positivity and the resilience and the recovery in the destinations which are really on the rise. And then we see very interesting trends with two topics which are pretty much driving a lot, and they can be combined, by the way, of the positivity and the resilience. It's about gastronomy and it's about events. Gastronomy is has always been, I would say, a major driver and competitive driver of Asia Pacific overall. So it's not a big surprise to see gastronomy in the top 3. What is a bit more surprising, but it somehow correlates also some consumer surveys we see where people express a very strong need to just indulge themselves, to socialize, and a good dining moments, a good farm to table, a cooking class is something that can really engage more into a kind of recovery and catching up, the lost time, with something which is a very quick win during a stay. So in terms of promotion, anything and everything you can do to promote specific aspects on the gastronomy will be a good seller, and I will come back to that in a detail after. So gastronomy number one, events is number two, and events was, if you remember, 2 years ago, even 1 year ago, it was very much mentioned, but more with negativity, with all these, cancel of events and people not really trusting they could go back to crowded places and so on. So the events is really back on track in positive, supported by many aspects I will comment later. And it's also a sign, and we have that also in surveys, that people now are ready again to meet, sometimes in large groups, sometimes a bit, in crowded places and lively events. There is no big obstacles anymore to meet again and to live, and again having a good social moment, looking at your favorite singer, or doing to again your favorite festivals. And then we see the very obvious nature and outdoor, and I will comment on that later as well, because it's a pretty obvious post-COVID kind of a recovery path. But it's kind of important now to continue with that, but somehow to go to something a bit different, or not only focusing on the pure outdoor and nature reconnection, because there's something else driving the sentiment, so including gastronomy and events, but also all the rest. And we see shopping on the rise, and then also wellness, along with the other aspects. Sustainability, I'll comment back on that later, because it's maybe not something people would spontaneously talk about, but when you really deep dive into what they're saying, then of course it's all about sustainability. And the mice is probably going to take a bit more time to be discussed again, to be populating conversations. So overall, the picture is really mentioning gastronomy, events, outdoor as kind of the key pillars of driving positivity and recovery in the sentiment. So getting a quick or mentioning quickly what is really driving the gastronomy, if we want to focus on the top three main drivers. Gastronomy, I was saying, is kind of a very easy quick win in terms of promotion, in terms of visitor experience, because of this willing to self-indulge and willing to somehow socialize, and this is the kind of things which people are looking for. There's been in the recent period a lot of positivity around that. A few interesting conversation paths or tracks are related to what Asia and Pacific can offer, or is associated as kind of incredible food, diversity. Also the celebration around specific, very traditional ingredients, or very iconic ingredients such as the tea or some other specific ingredients that some markets may not know about, so creating a lot of interest. All these, special conversations about, okay, the markets which are offering food made of insects, for example, things around the positive things around the seasonal food. So the kind of food that you can find during special periods, or which are prepared by specific ethnic groups, for example. Also the interesting conversation tracks around fusion. So fusion, mixing your roots in terms of gastronomy, but also maybe staged or mixed with a different way of presenting it, such as these food trucks you can find in Japan, that are, portraying both the cultural roots of gastronomy in Japan, but in a way that is maybe more fun, or maybe kind of, a bit American style. So this fusion of cuisine is also driving a lot of interest in social conversations. Then it can be very specific, very special, like the vegan trend or healthy tips. That can be also a nice way to differentiate your promotion. based on that. And also increasingly Asia Pacific is mentioned among the wine lovers as a next kind of bucket list destination to discover something which may be a bit different from the French wine, Italian wines, and so on. So great, and there are tons of different factors explaining the gastronomy, but certainly make sure that in your promotion, in your destination management development, you are able to offer the best and drive the best interest for your destination and travel brands. Even tourism is back, and that's a good news, not only economically but also in terms of promotion and everything, because the trust is there, the demand is back on track, and it's to me a perfect symbol of this resilience and the recovery. So it could be really very specific. You can find the traditional festivals and so on. What we feel, however, is the more specific, the better it has, a resonance on social conversations. So it could be about food, about art, about music, about sporting events. And again, it's a mix of, the possibility for people to reconnect again after COVID with their peers, with people sharing the same passion they have. For a specific band, specific sport teams, and so on. So all these big events or small events or specific events are fueling all the specific passion-based communities on social networks. And that's a great way to influence your brand and to impact and make sure that you are part of the game for any sort of specific themes. There's two aspects I would like to mention in terms of events. One is the link to gastronomy. So any events should have some sort of component around gastronomy, even if it's not focusing on that, but that's a great place to amplify this need for gastronomy, hedonistic experiences, and also the nature, the reconnection to the nature. So things and events related to what the nature is able to show you, such as the cherry blossom in Japan and equivalent, is fantastic in terms of resonance. And overall, events is great again for finding back these sensorial experiences that people are looking for after such a long time of frustrations with the pandemic. Nature outdoor, for sure, you will find there a lot of positivity and resilience around the classic outdoor activities, but also, reconnecting with the wildlife. People has been missing that, and wildlife has been very much commented and reported during COVID, with all the conversations around nature coming back and so on. When I say outdoor, it's very important, I think, to keep in mind that it doesn't necessarily mean people are only looking for, during the next travel, for outdoor activities outside cities, for example. Cities is still the number one destination people are looking for, by the way. So in terms of, intentions to travel. So the concept is more to give a little touch of outdoor or nature reconnections in whatever you are doing, whatever you are promoting. It could be, for example, during a pop-up cultural events in a city. You can maybe stage that and organize that in a park, in a garden in the city, with meeting the artist and so you are combining different aspects that includes nature and outdoor activities. This is a kind of a great driver for the sentiment today. And of course, learning, having a chance to explore with a local guide. And obviously, nature outdoor is very much resonating together with the concept of conscious, responsible travel. That's just a way to choose, the slow kind of tourism and respectful tourism to nature. And one of the things which we very much capture in social conversations are people sharing their van life, the classic road trips or train trips that is going to be slow and having a chance to connect again with the nature. And of course, beyond the iconic classic beach destinations, having a chance maybe also to explore some less known or more remote places. And I will comment on that with the Bali initiative later in the presentation. Of course, beyond all the three key drivers around gastronomy, event-driven tourism, outdoor, there are many other resilience drivers that are positive and fueling good reputation for the destination in your region. One is Asia Pacific portrayed as a great place for solo travel, and it's a kind of demand. I mean, of course, people want to reconnect with their travel companions, but there are many people who are solo travelers and used to be a solo traveler, and they are happy to come back to that kind of travel also because it's a way for them to reconnect to their travel passion and to reconnect with local people when they travel. So it seems Asia Pacific is pretty well portrayed for that as we speak. Also, the concept of shopping is, for many markets, I'm thinking particularly about Europe, a great DNA of Asia Pacific when it comes to having good deals and purchase the kind of things you may not be able to find in your home country. So shopping is also on the rise. It's nice and nicely associated to your destinations overall. And there's a fragment of visitors who are or travelers who are not so much impacted by the crisis economically. They feel even better than before financially, and they would be super happy to take a kind of a shopping luxury or shopping private tour when on their trip in your destination. Also, we're seeing a lot of positivity from and many DMOs are doing great jobs for kind of infusing that perception that Asia Pacific is great for this leisure or workation or staycation experience. And it may be more about the reputation that the reality, but when people are doing this and spending a few months working from whatever Sri Lanka or whatever destinations active in that area, they are becoming great ambassadors. So maybe there are just a few of them, but what they are telling about the destination is having a huge impact on the reputation. Then we have all these transport related positive factors about railways, which is a different way of exploring destination. Sailing as well. We see, of course, cruising, fueling positive reputation for your places, while the cruise operations are kind of resuming. Also, many resumption of conversations or search of conversations about in the expat community. So expat is not tourism, but it's also a great way to shape the reputation of places. And we are tracking a lot of that right now. And that's, again, a kind of positive resilience driver. And then, of course, all these artists, all the ghost ambassadors, which are kind of driving positive conversations about Asia Pacific and kind of activating the community of fans of those particular artists. So many positive contents, right, that support the resilience, that support the recovery. There are three initiatives that probably many of you are familiar already with, but we want to spot them because they are kind of very iconic in the way to engage into the path of a sustainable recovery. Because again, it's all about sustainability, right? It's so easy to fall back in the past traps in terms of over tourism and getting things a bit maybe not so well managed in terms of sustainability. So those three examples are interesting. One is the Tiaki Promise initiative and engagement that New Zealand has been let's say growing and implementing. So this one is a kind of engagement where the story is to say that in this country, locals are really seeing the nature as something that is part of their daily life. So it means every single natural sites or river, each mountain, every single tree as a story is kind of showing the identity and the local identity of the country through the faces of the country, so the people. And so this is targeting very much, of course, the foreign visitors, but somehow, thanks to this kind of engagement and initiative, gathering and engaging so much with local population, then suddenly they are becoming more and more local ambassadors of their own place. And you need to remember that there is today 50 to 60% of international visitors who are not so sure or have concern about if they are going to be well received and having warm hospitality from local people. There's a bit of negativity still in conversations about that. So with this kind of initiative, you somehow ensure that you are going to convert the local people into real ambassadors, because they're going to be proud and respect the place they live, and making sure that this is going to resonate well as well for the potential visitors that are going to visit them. So it's a nice, it's a bit conceptual, but it's a nice way of putting sustainability and tourism in hand also of local people, apart from the tourism staff and tourism professionals. So we like that initiative very much, and also because obviously it's kind of activating one of the key driver of positivity I mentioned earlier about the nature and the cultural environment. On a different prospect, there is another interesting initiative in Singapore that is kind of transforming or hybriding, so to speak, or removing the borders between the different silos, gastronomy, wellness, nature. It's all now combined together, and they have been doing this interesting, let's say, grouping or bounding together different type of activities for potential visitors. So that includes a component around gastronomy, which is number one, if you remember, number one driver of positivity, but also wellness. So it includes a special menu. So it's a nice co-op between different companies. So portrayed and promoted by the Singapore Tourism Board. And what I like particularly in this case, it's really having all the ingredients of the recovery. So I mean gastronomy, I mean some sort of slow activities like yoga, and in post-pandemic, it's nice kind of activities, and there's a huge demand for that. But also there is a lot of different events, such as the Tour de Beer Challenge, such as brewery tours. So it's a real good mix of slow and event-driven tourism that is gathering together different aspects of the visitor experience. And this is a real success, at least in terms of reputation, and for maximizing, accelerating the recovery of the reputation for that particular place. And finally, and before concluding, this last initiative that probably you're all aware of, Indonesia kind of enhancing tourism benefits locally by trying not to fall back in the past tracks of over-tourism. So in order to avoid over-tourism coming back on Bali, they are launching this new campaign. So I'm not sure if it's 5 new Bali or 10 new Balis, because we have also tracked some conversations about all the new Balis in Indonesia. But the concept is easy. It's just to make sure that, of course, Bali is great, but there are also other Balis. And so there's a way to disperse a bit more geographically to some of the less renowned places, but which also have a lot to offer, and generating by that a lot of income for the local community in those kind of new places. And also kind of sharing a bit the burden of having too many tourists coming back all at the same time, all at the same place, which is really not right, especially because of the labor shortage, and also combined with some very demanding tourists. We see and we measure every day that there is a bit of, it's very hard today to content and to be able to maximize satisfaction of visitors coming back, because there are kind of a revenge set of mind, and when you combine a lot of expectations, a lot of demand with restricted experiences, and sometimes a bit of lack of quality, just because you cannot sustain the demand, because you cannot find the people to do the right job in your hotels and attractions. Then you can create a bit of friction. So that's one of the aspects. Okay, so I will wrap up telling a few landmarks, few comments around this recovery path and resilience. It feels like when you analyze social sentiment from all these channels and everything, that many destinations in Asia Pacific, also in other countries in the world, are kind of reaching a sort of a tipping point where, okay, it's nice. So the gates are reopening, sometimes fully, and sometimes with no limitation. And so it's obviously great for the very short-term economic rebound. But then we see also this positivity around, okay, maybe I should make sure that when I reopen and I'm ready for that, and I will deliver the expected level of quality, because quality is also fueling the trust. And so there is nothing worse than if you are a destination and you are opening and promoting, and you see all these people coming back and all the flights full, etc., but then you're not ready to deliver the type of quality of experience people are looking for, and this is detrimental for your reputation. So you kind of mitigating all the promotional efforts you're doing because of that, because people are sharing a lot now again their experience. So we have this in the resilience path kind of a question mark around, we know people and visitors have a bit lower tolerance limits in terms of crowd, noise, and they want to lead the full experience. So they are now more confident about the pandemic. So if you combine that with labor shortage, you may have, and we measure that, some drop of satisfaction. So one of the strategy that we analyze and see in the social conversations as well is to make sure that maybe you can have a bit less than before COVID. You reopen your doors, you have a bit less, but those people you attract tend to be more satisfied, so they spend more. And from the Visa cards data we analyze in many places, we feel and measure that they spend more than before still today. So it means you can have a bit less of visitors or guests in your hotels, but spending more because simply they want to self-indulge, and they are much more aware and happy to engage into more activities. So you can have, this well-balanced resilience and recovery path, where economically, at the end of the day, you have the same impact, but you have less risk of over-tourism and travel frictions. I would like also to focus again on the fact that the more specific you are in terms of promoting special aspects of food, special type of very unique events, a new kind of outdoor activities that could be related to maybe one-day excursions from the busy Bangkok, going to 1 or 2 day excursions for something completely new that is reconnecting with the nature. So all these specificity is always super positive in terms of reputation and promotion. And obviously, as always, and that's kind of a recurrent topic, sustainability cannot be an option anymore. It was not the case before COVID. It cannot be the case today. And just as an example or data-based evidence of that, we are measuring 33% of increasing of volumes of posts and articles and people sharing together conversations around concepts of sustainability in the past 12 months. So the demand for that is still very, very high, and it's very transverse to all type of activities. So it means also, and I will finish with that in terms of if you are a DMO, there is no other choice to really add and making sure you add the mandate of managing the destination, at least increasing the industry relationship, because the management and the experience is really, again, everything. People are back in your destination, they are back in your hotels, in your attractions, so they are living again the experience after 2 years of frustrations. And so this is driving the reputation very much, and so it should be the DMO responsibility to make sure that the sentiment of visitors is at best and at least better than the competition. And really, I mean, social data can help on that. So feel free to contact us if you want to know more about your specific destinations or travel brands, because not everything is good for everyone, and you may be able to find the very specific organic drivers that can make the difference in terms of promotion or in terms of visitor experience. Whereas we feel overall that the competition is also back on track, and competition for Asia Pacific as well. And I'm thinking about long-haul travel. It's very slow today, but by 2 to 3 years, it's going to come back, and then people will remember what they heard about people coming back in Asia, etc. So it's you know, this kind of data can help somehow understand the tactical approach in terms of promotion. So I was a bit long, sorry for that. So I'm happy to take your question if you may have. Now or later if you prefer.
Yeah, well, as Olivier just said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A at the bottom of your at the bottom of the Zoom browser. Please don't put them in the chat. Just it's hard for me to go back and forth between the chat and the Q&A while I'm doing the talking with Olivier. So I do have some questions, but actually just want to say it was a great presentation. You know, it's good to see the data sort of aligning with a lot of things that a lot of activities that PATA is doing over the past 12 months, as well as what we have planned over the next few months, or the next 6 months, as Liz has mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. So, you know, to sort of kick off the Q&A, I did have a couple of questions that I want to start off myself. So my first question is, you know, we hear a lot about inflation. So what do you see about, how do you see the impact of inflation and rising costs occurring in some markets in the resilience and recovery planning?
Yeah, it's a good point, and indeed, of course, this macroeconomic is impacting a lot the tourism, as we know, and also we feel a bit that and measure that in social conversations, and it's a pity because, you know, we have this pandemic. It's not behind us, but it's kind of something, okay, a bit more behind that in front of us. Then we have, you know, the Ukraine crisis. Then we have geopolitical tensions and everything. So each time we feel the recovery is there, there's an external factors coming back. And the last one is more the microeconomic factors and all this inflation. And from a consumer sentiment, of course, it's going probably to slow down a bit, the resilience and the recovery speed. Particularly, we can suspect, of course, to see long-haul travelers, past long-haul travelers to Asia, taking a bit of time before coming back, because they would feel a bit currently some very mature and you know, big markets like France is having a huge inflation. So obviously, in terms of arbitrage for destination, people continue to travel, but they are going still with this inflation to maybe probably they will be encouraged somehow to stay more within Europe. So international travel, but maybe more short-haul travel than long-haul travel. And so, yes, of course, for the markets experiencing huge inflation, it's going to have an impact, especially because it's combined with the rise of cost for fuel and for flights. And there is no other way, if you are based in Europe or in the US, to go to Asia by flight, right? So it's combining both. It's going to slow down for sure, and that's part of the a bit negative drivers we capture. However, they are about 10 to 20, 25% sometimes of markets, so international travelers, who are still today better in terms of spending power than before the crisis, the COVID crisis. So the inflation for them, and particularly the most affluent, is having an impact, but it doesn't stop them to travel at all, including in long-haul markets. So it means in terms of luxury travel, affluent travel, there is still a very good chance to be able to attract those people because the inflation is not making such a huge change for them in terms of, you know, personal financial situation. What we feel in terms of additional consequence from the inflation is more that is going to create an additional pressure on the value for money perception, we're seeing, I was mentioning that, a drop of satisfaction and value for money perception even before the inflation, when people come back because of this, difficulty and the challenge to offer the full and safe experience when tourism is back. Now with the rise of cost, it's increasing again the demand for the best quality, even more than before. So for those who are not going to stop traveling because of that, they will have much more demand about the value they get for the money they spend. So that gives another pressure for DMOs and the ecosystem of tourism to make sure to maximize. And I think everybody would agree to say it's a challenge, because unfortunately at the same time there is a labor shortage in many places. So that's one of the kind of a challenge, I would say, from this the consequence from that rise of cost and inflation.
Then, you talked about segments, but then like what markets would you advise to look at in priority for accelerating the recovery in APAC?
Yeah, that's always the same issue about which market is a priority, and it's obviously depend on where you are and all the airlift and possibility and restrictions and the borders reopening and so on. So the supply is just dictating always this kind of priority for different markets. So there's not one list fitting all the destinations, of course. I mean, basically, yes, you need to look at how each market is doing in terms of exposure to this inflation, how far they are still demanding in terms of travel, which is the case for most of the markets. But we see some of them like France or even China was very much in demand of traveling internationally as soon as possible. So in terms of markets, obviously the regional markets will be on priority. Domestic markets, still they're very much there for it's an easy, quick win to recover whenever possible. But I would say maybe Europe should be on a focus for two reasons. Europe is currently, of course, having some challenges in terms of geopolitics, in terms of economic inflations and so on. But still, Europe is one of the key markets on demand in terms of international travelers. They used to love Asia. They are still loving Asia for those who are able to go, but it's still in European consumer a long way to go. And when you combine the super high price in terms of flying with a bit of uncertainties, but also if you look at competitiveness, right now we see Europe very much traveling again internationally, but extremely intra-Europe. So you have massive flows of visitors going again to Spain, to Greece, and all the classic destinations. But also compared to Asia, many Europeans basically look at Middle East, or some of the Emirates are also part of Asia as a broad definition, but many of them are kind of stopping in the Middle East today. Middle East, Africa is back on the sentiment in positive way. There used to be the Dubai Expo, and there's a lot of attraction and competitiveness for 1,000 Eastern Asian countries, Pacific countries, compared to a Middle East that is very active also in terms of event-driven tourism. So what I'm just trying to say is the competitiveness for the European market is very large, intra-regional, and also outside, maybe more in the Middle East part compared to Asia Pacific. So it's quite important to keep track and to continue promoting or keeping the link, at least, let's say the reputation link with the European market, because doors will reopen very, very soon, very large. And then it's important to be still on top of the list because of this, competitiveness. Whereas, for example, the North America is also very much on demand for Europe, but currently with the currency exchange, it's not so interesting right now for Europe. So there are a couple of tactical, aspects to look at. So I would say Europe on the mid to long term, and of course in the short term, the most obvious markets, those who are able to travel, domestic travel, regional travel, and all these markets are the very obvious ones to tap into in a very short term, I would say.
Thanks. If there's any questions, feel free to drop it in. I think we only have like about 5 minutes left, but I do have one other question then. If you look at social sentiment, like sort of from Asia perspective, are Asians looking at more intra-regional travel, or are they looking at long haul or medium travel, sort of outbound from Asia? Have you looked at that yet?
Yeah, we're seeing it's interesting point because it's also a kind of a intra competition for Asia Pacific, and from a pure let's say consumer sentiment. So we track that from consumer surveys across 20 different markets. We are seeing Asian markets looking at traveling outside Asia kind of as soon as possible. So the sentiment overall is very positive. I could mention, for example, China is mentioning Europe as the #1 place to visit for a next international travel. It doesn't mean they will do it, but in terms of sentiment and reputation, and despite the crisis now we have with Ukraine, Europe is super attractive today for many Asian markets. So that's why I'm also saying it's important to not forget them, because they might be very tempted to go outside Asia whenever they can. Whereas we feel and measure from this consumer sentiment data as well, that some of the European markets may take a bit more time to choose again Asia compared to before. Even if there are, there's been a lot of great stories in reports and everything about Thailand reopening. Thailand is very much leading the age in terms of reputations of one of the first Asian place to reopen for European markets, for example. There's been a lot of super great reports on that. So this is this competitive balance and that we measure and showing that if the market is not functioning in a normal way today, still the demand is there and the competition is very much there. So and we measure that also from rating and reviews data. So many people again commenting on the, would you go more to Indonesia or Malaysia, or would you go more to the US or to Thailand for like a nature itineraries or road trip or stuff like that. So we are seeing all this, and what I would like to finish on is maybe not only focusing on market-based marketing, but also across markets, tapping into the passion-based tourism, because then you have a better chance to attract, I don't know, people who are big fans of snorkeling or diving from Australia, Belgium, and maybe whatever places around the world in your destination in Asia, compared to only focusing on how to attract Australians or Chinese. So again, the passion-based is a primary motivator for traveling today. And then passion people are more able to spend more for paying a high flight tickets to get to the fabulous snorkeling destinations in Vietnam or wherever, even if it means for them a bit of travel logistics and everything. So this thinking more about segments than markets or crossing together, to me, is one of the best segmentation process to implement.
So I guess realistically, then you're talking about people who are passionate about food. Then that would be like that big sort of market that then you should kind of consider looking into and researching it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think we're just about at the 1 hour mark. So thank you so much, Olivier, for that fantastic presentation. I see Margaret, a good friend Margaret from Australia, actually echoed the same sentiment. So thank you so much, Olivier, for spending the time with us and for helping us actually produce the report. As Liz said, the report is now available on our website. It is free for all members. Non-members, there is a fee to obtain it, but all members, this is part of your membership benefits. So with that, thank you so much, Olivier. And if you have any questions for Olivier, you can always send them to us. We'll be happy to pass them over to him and his team. Also, his presentation will be available for for all the delegates here, of course, for all our members. And if you missed any part of this webinar, there will be recording available. It's only available for members only and for those who register for this webinar. So feel free to contact us. I'll give you my email at the end of this this little wrap up here, and you can contact me if you want a copy of either the presentation or the recording or both. So thank you so much, Olivier. I'll do a quick wrap up, and we'll see you. We'll see you again soon. All right.
See you soon in Asia, hopefully. Bye.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Or one of our events. We have a. I'll go through that in just a second, but let me just talk about the reports. So the report that this webinar is actually based off is our Issues and Trends, volume 27. It's available now on the PATA website at www.pada.org/catalog. It's social sentiment resilience drivers for promoting Asia Pacific destinations, authored by our good friend Olivier at TCI, Olivier and his team at TCI. The other publication I have on the screen is our Asia Pacific visitor forecast or updates. That was actually added this year because we actually just released them a few weeks ago. So that is available for members. I think for different categories, there's different pricing, but that is available. So if you're a member, if you missed that webinar, you can actually email us and we can give you a copy of that recording. So if you've missed that particular webinar. So just want to update you on some of our events that are happening later this year. Our Destination Marketing Forum. So we would love to see you in person. You know, we actually had a small in-person event with our PATA Thailand chapter just the other week. It was fantastic seeing old friends and meeting new people. We had people from across the spectrum. And so, I look forward to events. So I'm really looking forward to Destination Marketing Forum. It's our first large-scale event in person since the pandemic. It is complimentary, so register today. It's August 2nd to the 4th in Songkhla, Thailand. There's direct flights from Malaysia and Singapore. If you're Penang, I think you can just drive across the board. It's like 40 minutes. But of course, there's plenty of flights to Bangkok and then connecting to Songkhla. I believe after July 1st, Thailand will be actually lifting a lot of the restrictions. But for more information on that, do check out the TAT website for information about that. But I do believe they will be making some changes to coming into Thailand, so that'll be extremely easier. I think it's almost close to normal. So that's a Destination Marketing Forum, August 2nd to 4th. We also have our annual summit, October 25th to the 27th in Ras Al Khaimah, UAE in the Emirates. It's actually only 45 minutes from Dubai Airport. It is a fantastic destination. I've been there several times already. There's both desert, there's both sea and sun, sand. Do join us. It has the world's longest zip line. It is one of the complimentary tours. It's got many other different attractions, Pearl Farm, it's said all part of the company tour. You can find out more information about that. We'll be actually announcing some speakers soon. And of course, if you have any questions, you can email us as well. Also, to remind you that our Gold Awards, our deadline for submissions is the end of this month. It's June 30th. So that's actually just next week. So if you haven't gotten your application in, send them today. We have two main categories on marketing, sustainability, and social responsibility. For more information, do check out our website, www.pada.org. If you have any questions about today's webinar or about any of the activities I just showed here, feel free to contact me. My email is right there on the screen, fairly easy, paul@pada.org, or you can always visit our website at www.pada.org. So again, thank you to Olivier for that beautiful presentation and for, of course, helping us with the report. Thank you to Liz for taking the time out of her busy schedule to give us our opening remarks. Thank you, as always, to all of our members, our PATA Life members, our chapter members. Without your continued support, none of this would be possible. And of course, thank you to all of you for joining us here today. So thank you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you soon. Take care. Goodbye.